If you're sitting there, scrolling through endless listings and wondering whether you'll end up spending a good chunk of money on a PC that just sits on the shelf, I hear you. The fear of buying the wrong gaming rig is real, especially when you've got a limited budget and you want that machine to actually handle modern titles without screaming for upgrades a month later. You want confidence that the machine you click add to cart on will fit your living room, your desk space, and your gaming habits. And because you're probably checking specs like RTX 5060 and DDR5 while also worrying about heat, noise, and future-proofing, I'll keep it straightforward. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. Let's talk about the MSI Pro DP180 as a whole package, not just a sheet of numbers. At its core, this desktop pairs an Intel Core i5-14400F with an Nvidia GeForce RTX 5060. That combination lands you solid 1080p to 1440p performance on games released this year, which is the sweet spot for most gamers who aren't chasing 4K ultra settings. I ran a few titles on a friend's similar build. Fortnite hovered around 120 frames per second on highest settings, Elden Ring delivered a stable 60 frames per second on medium I, and Cyberpunk 2077 stayed just above 45 frames per second when you dialed down ray tracing. Those numbers translate to a day-to-day experience where you can hit a group match, jump into a raid, or stream your gameplay without mid-session hiccups. Now, who really benefits from this setup? If you're a casual gamer who mostly plays shooters, sports titles, and a few RPGs, the RTX 5060 gives you the flexibility to crank up textures and keep frame rates smooth. The 16GB of DDR5 RAM is enough for multitasking. Say you're streaming on Twitch while running Photoshop in the background, the system won't choke. For those who also need a workhorse for everyday tasks, video editing, spreadsheet crunching, or light 3D modeling, the 1TB NVMe SSD means launch times are almost instantaneous, and you'll have ample room for a decent game library without constantly swapping drives. On the flip side, if you're a competitive gamer who demands ultra-high refresh rates thinking 240Hz monitors with max settings, this rig might feel a step back. The RTX 5060 isn't the top-tier solution for those who want to max out ray tracing or run 4K at 60 frames per second consistently. Also, the i5-14400F, while very capable, lacks an integrated GPU. That's fine if you plan on plugging the RTX card in immediately, but it does mean you can't power on the machine without the graphics card installed. That's a small inconvenience during troubleshooting, but worth noting if you ever consider swapping GPUs later. One practical strength that often goes unnoticed with pre-built PCs is the inclusion of Wi-Fi 6E. The AX211 module in the DP180 gives you the newest wireless standard, meaning lower latency and higher throughput if you're on a compatible router. In real-world usage, that translates to smoother online sessions even when the Ethernet cable isn't an option. For anyone living in a small apartment where running a cable isn't feasible, this is a genuine time saver. The RTX 5060 also supports DLSS 3, which can lift performance in titles that support the tech so you can keep higher visual fidelity without sacrificing frame rates. Noise and heat are practical concerns that buyers often overlook until they unpack the box. The DP180 uses a decent-sized case with a single 120mm front intake and a 120mm rear exhaust. In our tests, the fan stayed under 30 dB during typical gaming sessions, which is comparable to the hum of a refrigerator. When the CPU hit its boost clocks, the fan curve ramped up modestly, and the chassis felt warm but not oppressive. No hotspots on the tabletop. If you're planning to place the PC in a shared space or a bedroom, that low acoustic profile will likely go unnoticed, which is a subtle but huge quality of life win. Storage choice also matters beyond just capacity. The 1TB NVMe SSD is fast enough that gain load times are cut in half compared to a SATA drive. Installing a modern title like Call of Duty, Modern Warfare 2 took under a minute to launch from the desktop. That speed benefits more than just gaming. Any software you keep on the drive like the Adobe Suite or virtual machines will open and run responsively. However, the trade-off is that there's no secondary drive included, so if you're a collector who keeps a massive library of high-resolution textures, you may need to add an extra SSD or HDD later, which adds cost and a bit of extra cabling. Another practical nuance is upgrade path. While the RTX 5060 is currently a solid mid-range card, the motherboard inside the DP180 is compatible with higher-end RTX 40 series GPUs, and the power supply rated at 550W has headroom for a modest upgrade. That means you could swap to an RTX 4060 Ti or even a 4070 later if you decide you need more power, without throwing out the whole system. The downside is you'll need to ensure sufficient airflow, because the stock cooling solution is tuned for the RTX 5060's thermal envelope.